What's going on, friends? When it comes to the twin cam 103 engine, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say the twin cam 103 was the time that Harley-Davidson actually got the twin cam engine right. These were damn good motors. And what do you do when you get something right in your Harley-Davidson? Well, obviously, you do what everybody else does. You change everything. Now guys, why I say why the twin cam 103 was one of the best motors made, it's just the fact that if Harley-Davidson had been perfecting this twin cam engine from 99 all the way up until 2017. Well, I guess I wouldn't go as far as to say perfecting it because, well, there was a lot of planned obsolescence into these engines, as you know, and going forward with Harley-Davidson, it was always faster production, cheaper production, and get as many out as we can and do it with the least expense as possible. And of course with the press cranks, that was always kind of somewhat a debatable issue. But on the 103, it really seemed like they had the press crank issue kind of straightened out. Were they still sloppy? Yeah, they definitely were, but we had the roller bearings in the bottom end, and a lot of these motors, they actually did run well over 100,000 miles, even with some performance modifications, and nothing else really done to that crank. So what we want to do today is we want to kind of look at some of the differences that the 103 had over the 96. And we'll take a look at some of the things that really made the 103 one of the best twin cam engines Harley-Davidson ever made. Guys, please don't forget, if you enjoy the video, please don't forget to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Now, as I mentioned with the twin cam 103, these engines did have the press crank. But by this time, Harley-Davidson had gotten pretty good at pressing cranks. And by pretty good at pressing cranks, I mean they work, they're great, just don't go and actually do a run out on them, because if you do a run out on them, obviously they're not going to be right. But if we ignore the run out, you're actually pretty good to go there with the way they designed it. Now, the only thing about the 103 that really doesn't sit well with me, and you guys know this from previous videos, is going to be that automatic primary chain tensioner. That thing, especially if you shift the gears really hard, it can actually tend to ratchet up tighter and tighter on you. And as I mentioned, that is my theory on why the 6-speed transmission had so much trouble. Because as that automatic primary chain tensioner ratchets up and gets tighter, it's pulling everything together. Your transmission, your crankshaft, this is what would lead to the excessive run out, and also what would lead to some of the failures that we saw in the 6-speed transmission. So definitely something, just you don't have to do it, but something I would look into is putting a manual in there or going with something aftermarket like the Hayden automatic. To me, that's a lot better design versus the one that they have in there that ratchets up automatically. I really don't like that because once it goes up, it doesn't go down, and it does not compensate for tight and loose spots in the chain. Now, the 103, very highly reliable engine in my experience and from what I've seen as far as versus the 96 and the 88s and a lot of the problems that we've seen. Of course, you do have your problem children out there that always come back into the shop, but for the most part, the 103 is pretty solid. Also, with the 103 engine, these motors have more power right out of the box over the 96 and damn sure over the 88. Over the 96, when you put a camshaft into a 103, things start to happen pretty quick in short order. And those things happen even better if you've got it down. You don't even have to increase the displacement. Just hone your cylinders out, make sure you're good to go, re-ring them with a new set of high compression pistons in there, and when you put some little bit of compression into a twin cam 103, you can really build some power even with a mild camshaft. Now, honestly, if you ride a 96 and a 103 back to back, you may not really feel a whole lot of difference. But if you're on a 103 and somebody else is on a 96 and you guys are rolling on, going up hills, passing cars, you're loaded down, you will notice a difference at that point for sure. Now, the other thing with the 103 is the later models had the HO version. Now, the HO version came with a little hotter cam. It was about a 511 lift versus the 486 lift from previous versions. Now, the HO, the high output, I wouldn't exactly call it a high output, but it did give a minute increase in horsepower, but the torque, it did produce a little bit more torque. The only thing that the 511 cam did was it put more torque down low for you, and that's obviously where you want it on a Harley-Davidson. Now, with the Twin Cam 103, if you guys are interested in twin cooling, this was the bike that they started it out on. You can get a twin-cooled Twin Cam 103. So what was interesting about the twin cooling on these bikes, when Harley-Davidson did twin cooling, it wasn't targeted for performance. Even though they did raise the compression ratio on the twin cool bikes to about 10-to-1 versus the 9.6-to-1 that was on the 103. What they did is they raised the compression ratio, yes, for a little bit more power, but really because they could get away with it. The twin cooling was really designed more for a rider comfort. It wasn't meant to really boost performance. Although by raising the compression, the little bit of added performance was a nice little side effect. Now, one of the other benefits about going with the Twin Cam 103 is, especially if you buy a dresser, you get the big heavy touring bikes. The 103 is going to pull those a lot better than the 96. And also at that time on the 103, Harley-Davidson made oil coolers standard on all the big dressers. You no longer had to go back and add them. If you had a dresser with the 103, you got that oil cooler in there. And a 103 can honestly save you some money in the long run because there's less you have to do to a 103, less you have to put into it to actually get a more bang for your buck. You can leave that 103 displacement, as I mentioned, high compression pistons, bolt-in cam. Things will start to happen really quick in short order at that point, especially when you start raising compression up to 10-to-1. Now here's another great benefit about the 103. It's the heads. On the 103, they have automatic compression releases. So if you decide to go with higher compression, you don't have to worry about getting compression releases installed. They're automatic. They're already in there. All you have to do is hit the start button. The bike will do everything for you. If you have a 96 or an 88, you start hopping them up and you want to go with high compression, you either have to A, buy another set of heads, or B, take your heads to a machine shop and have them machined for a compression release. And then you're probably going to end up going with the manual ones. You're going to have to reach down there, push the compression release on both cylinders, and then bump it off. And hopefully it'll start. You'll be repeating that process till it starts, which it should start. For me, the 103, the big selling point is having those compression releases in the heads already. That's going to save you a lot of money in downtime and machining. And plus, it's just literally one less thing that you have to buy and put into the bike. Now, of course, with a 103, just like a 96, drop on 110 kit, easy to do. The only difference between really the 96 and the 103 is really just the top end. They are the same stroke, just a bigger bore on the 103. But with the 103, you get a little bit more torque. They're rated at about 100 foot-pounds of torque right out of the box, which I think that's a little high. Generally, we see about low to mid-90s in torque, and horsepower can be anywhere from about 70 to 75 horse on a stock 103. Now, of course, you get a good set of exhaust on it and a tuner, you're good to go. So guys, getting a bike with a 103 in it, it is going to command some more money out there, but if you think about it, you can pay a little bit more up front, you get more power up front, you can enjoy it as is without really feeling like you need to do something immediately to it. But when you do decide to do something to it, it takes less to get you there. You don't have nearly as many hurdles to go through like you would with an 88 or a Twin Cam 96. Like I say, the biggest selling point for me on the Twin Cam 103 is already having, from the factory, automatic compression releases in the head. That's worth a lot to me because machine shops are not cheap. But anyhow guys, that is why I like the Twin Cam 103, and I feel like that was one of the best twin cam engines Harley ever built. By the time they went out of production, those engines were pretty solid. They were pretty reliable. 2014, 15, 16, 17, I really liked those years of the Twin Cam 103. They had it down pat. And then of course they threw it all out the window, went with the Milwaukee 8, and we started out with a whole new slew of problems on our own, and one being the oiling system with the Milwaukee 8. You would have thought with the Twin Cam they would have kind of learned, with what they learned on the Twin Cam, you thought they would have carried that over to the Milwaukee 8, because the later years of the M8, or the later years of the Twin Cam 103 had a pretty dang good oiling system on it. But anyhow guys, that's all I've got for you this week. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. But until next week guys, you ride safe, dodge those cars, and I'll catch you guys back here next week with a brand new video. Thanks for watching.